I'm going to go through from a big picture sort of perspective about information sharing and safeguarding and try to make the case that geospatial information sharing and empowering the geospatial enterprise through information sharing and safeguarding both advances geospatial concepts and techniques, but as well can really drive a larger conversation. I want to do that by first talking a little bit about my mission in office, bridge to what I think are some exciting initiatives around information sharing and safeguarding, and aligning our activities with international standards organizations, then bring it back to geospatial information sharing and techniques and capabilities. So then Mark mentioned the National Strategy for Information Sharing and Safeguarding. President Obama issued that in 2012. The key to the vision of the national strategy is the right information at the right time to any authorized users, no technology barriers, just those that are required by law and policy, with a comprehensive regime of accountability to prevent misuse. The right information at the right time to the right people. Within the national strategy, there's three principles. The core one in my mind is that the point of information sharing is to make proactive decisions to protect the American people and to prevent harm. Really, that's a broader kind of capability that underpins a lot of information systems and the work that CIS do broadly is effective decision support. We work across 5 communities: law enforcement, intelligence, defense, foreign affairs, homeland security, across the entire federal government with our state and local partners and our partners in the private sector and internationally. A key focus on terrorism-related information sharing, but a recognition that the only way to do this effectively and at scale is working with standards organizations, working with our partners with industry, working to encapsulate the information sharing and safeguarding best practices, including geospatial information sharing support, to make it accessible broadly to support interoperable solutions. So just to give a little bit more context to our mission, we work in the domestic nexus of national security and public safety. In our country, 18,000 police departments, 90% of which have 50 or fewer sworn officers. Very large degree of fragmentation. That's a feature, not a bug, of our constitutional democracy and open society. 90% of those 18,000 police departments have 50 or fewer sworn officers, again, pointing to the need for standardized approaches, common solutions, and in particular, as we think about technology trends and the migration to the cloud, mobile, visualization, decision support, the kind of things that Ann was talking about just a few moments ago, critical that there's common approaches, and we're looking at this in a holistic way, but still empowering local decisions, local decision making. As we look at this and our mission, key is advancing privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties, but as important is the notion here that what we are charged to do is to help bridge existing systems, existing databases, harmonize policy, not build new systems, but drive interoperability across existing systems in a distributed, decentralized, yet coordinated way. This takes you to the idea of dual use, right? The idea that what we don't want to be doing is to continually build new systems, new point applications in response to point challenges. The challenges we face as a society, in my domain, terrorism, homeland security, and other domains, incident response, sustainability, climate change, require collaborative approaches that are based on agility that are built into existing systems to support interoperability and advanced models of collaboration and coordination across multiple agencies, levels of government, with the public sector and the private sector. To go from the, kind of the real tangible to a little bit of abstraction, but to help make it a little bit more understandable, we are supporting our partners to build information sharing environments. In the center there's the application of the ISE Information Sharing Environment, Core Interoperability Framework for the Federal Counterterrorism Information Sharing Environment. We're bringing together mission partners in this interoperability vision, focusing on the white space between agencies, helping them modify their enterprise architectures on the edge to effectively share information across that federal counterterrorism ISE. Every one of our mission partners has a myriad of other missions other than counterterrorism, homeland security. The Environmental Protection Agency, for example, Ann's organization, has a homeland security mission. It's a component along with so many other things that they do. No agency wants to fragment their enterprise architecture by doing interoperability in a one-off way. Frankly, that's an oxymoron, right? Interoperability has to be cross-cutting. So all of our agencies are working on mission-centric ISEs in their domain area and multiple ISEs. This is part of the power of the information sharing environment approach through common standards. The idea that by aligning with industry, leveraging best practices, whether they're geospatial or security or privacy or what have you, you can get a return on the investment more broadly. In addition to federal partners, you'll see we have a state or regional information sharing environment working. We currently have initiatives with our state partners here in the U.S. to support them to build out statewide information sharing environments spanning the different activities at the state level with an initial focus on the law enforcement, counterterrorism, homeland security, but looking more broadly so that those state ISEs can plug into a national ISE, again with a focus on interoperability. Now this is a pretty broad vision. How do folks on-ramp onto this vision? Well, that's the example in the upper left, point-to-point solutions. Where things always start is I have a problem. What can I leverage as I want to solve that problem? What do I have off the shelf? How do I solve this problem? And kind of the core to our approach is better packaging these interoperability approaches and standards and capabilities so that folks that are solving a point-to-point problem can do it in a way that buys them leverage to bootstrap into these other information sharing environments. So how do we do this? Key to the way we operate, I co-chair a White House policy committee, the Information Sharing Council, that has all of my federal partners. As our work with state and local partners in this domestic nexus of national security and public safety, there's a capstone committee called the Criminal Intelligence Coordinating Council underneath the Department of Justice's Global Justice Advisory Committee. All of the national practice associations, law enforcement, homeland security, sit on that committee along with principals from core federal national security public safety agencies. It is the capstone where we are coordinating things like baseline capabilities with fusion centers across the country, privacy policies, all the rest. For this audience, what's interesting is the Standards Coordinating Council, and let me go into this in more depth. We work with several international standards organizations, including the Open Geospatial Consortium, Mark's organization, OASIS, the Object Management Group, several government standards organizations like NIST and the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group, the NEAM Program Office, FBI's Criminal Justice Information Systems Advisory Policy Board, and so forth, and several industry associations. And a key focus of this work is to collaborate around what we call project interoperability. It's the distillation of our enterprise architecture framework, including our alignment with geospatial techniques sponsored by the Federal Geographic Data Committee, aligned with standards out of the Open Geospatial Consortium. There's a website to get more information about the activity of the Standards Coordinating Council, standardscoordination.org, standardscoordination.org. So I mentioned project interoperability as a flagship of our work with the Standards Coordinating Council. So starting to bring it back to geospatial activity, we got involved with the Open Geospatial Consortium, the NEAM Program Office, to harmonize the National Information Exchange Model with geographic markup language. GEO for NEAM, the results of that project were encapsulated out of OGC's Testbed 11. If it works, I'm going to show a little video at the end of the presentation that captures that. There's also a reference here to the Geospatial Interoperability Reference Architecture. I'll come back to that. More broadly, these are tools. Some are frameworks, some are standards, some are engineering efforts, some are guidance, some are industry-based assertion of conformance to interoperability profiles. It's a variety of tools, and the work we've been doing with Project Interoperability, especially kind of going forward into Project Interoperability 2.0, is how do we better engineer and package these to make it increasingly more accessible. The way we're doing that, with security constraints, privacy constraints, common profile for describing information exchanges, and encapsulating how we encapsulate geospatial as a crosscut across our interoperability framework is through what we're calling an assertion-based architecture. The key here is to define your interoperability requirements in a way that they're testable. It's assertions that are atomic, that are engineered, that can be tested, where you can drive a certification of conformance to those through an audit process, and those assertions are well engineered so that they span across different domains of activity, different communities of interest. And I'll talk about how we do that in a second. The assertion-based architecture is the heart of the ISE core interoperability framework. In addition to that, there's an integration library which provides training, tools, executive guides, templates, pointers to exemplar solutions that give you a complete product to, again, make the interoperability framework usable and useful across the myriad of stakeholders. So what do I mean by assertions? So some examples of assertions are listed here. Kind of interesting, how many folks here have ever spent any time with 853 out of NIST? Right, a couple of folks. That's, well, everybody here actually is impacted by it every day when you turn on your computer at work or you're involved in any kind of risk management discussion. You just may not realize it. The 853 series is the capstone of the US government's work around cybersecurity, FISMA, network security, and privacy in terms of listing out atomic controls, 1,000 or so of these controls that in turn reflect how organizations organize around implementing security and privacy. What we've been focusing on in this approach is that framework plus other types of assertions and working to make those reusable bundles of assertions around, for example, how you onboard somebody, how you assign attributes and manage those attributes and things like that. So within project interoperability, and it's an eye chart, so don't focus on trying to read the specifics here, but I wanted to emphasize that as a part of the Project Interoperability 2.0 work that we have underway, we're actually building out with our partners in the Standards Coordinating Council specific artifacts that allow for reuse of these assertions that describe how an organization does security and privacy and other aspects of interoperability in a way that ties to existing information sharing agreements, procurement frameworks like FedRAMP and the rest, in a way that can be audited through third-party audit capabilities and can be automated to enforce policy. We have some pilot projects that are helping us develop and use this. Some examples of where this is being used in earlier incarnations at scale, actually within our domain. Key to this is some really interesting work that's come out of NIST over the last number of years under the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace called the TrustMark Framework, work that's anchored at Georgia Tech Research Institute but has been sponsored by the US government. So again, as an example of how we're leveraging the investment over the past decade plus in responsible information sharing, further packaging it, making it accessible to folks. An example of where this is coming real is in our core domain, the law enforcement space, where we've been looking at what's called the CJIS security policy, the gold standard for law enforcement information sharing nationally, and refactoring that security policy with stakeholders involved into this framework that allows for automation and, for example, sharing law enforcement information in certain valid scenarios with the health and human services community. Think prisoner reentry, mental health type of things. You know, so it's probably not able to read this, but the point I wanted to make with this slide is at the bottom, the core, information sharing and safeguarding ISE interoperability framework. I talked about the assertion-based architecture. It's assertions about the use of standards in a packaged and engineered way. So really what we're talking about here is a thin layer on top of existing standards used broadly across many different communities, including the geospatial community. Right, and the way we're making sure this works is by involving those standards organizations that are stewards of these different standards. So standards and use of standards is a black art, right? It's always hard to get consistent usage of standards to really get interoperability when the implementation's happening across domains of activities, levels of government, different agencies. But this framework allows for a degree of standardization and harmonization of the use of these frameworks and standards to drive a higher degree of interoperability. Key, and I don't know if you can see it here, but there's an operational view on the left and a technical view on the right. Again, coming back to there's different actors that you have to involve in not just having the technical assertion-based architecture, but the artifacts and supporting infrastructure around that architecture to actually make it accessible and useful to folks. On the left-hand side, there's something called a Playbook, and I want to dive into that. How many folks here are familiar with the U.S. Digital Services Playbook? Anybody look at it or use it? Okay, a few folks, and our friends at EPA, I see. That's good. The The playbook is good. It features agile approaches to development, right? But we extended that playbook on 4 dimensions. Number 1 is we added the idea of communities of interest, right? Not a singular team, but teams that are spread across many different agencies that want to be able to interoperate. 2 is the integration of security and privacy controls, the assertion-based architecture approach I talked about. 3 is the idea of maturity models. Not every entity in a community of interest has the same level of maturity. So how do they share information as they are today? How do they set a vector to improve their capability to share and safeguard information going forward? And 4th, we added in pointers to references and resources. Things like the assertion-based architecture and the different artifacts around it. Things like the body of knowledge that resides at the FDGC, at the Open Geospatial Consortium, and things like that. Now there's 15 different plays that start from things like building out a community of interest, formalizing that community of interest through defining what it means to be a member of that community through security and privacy constraints, building initial support on requirements and for prototyping and piloting, proving the solution to allow you to build a business case. There's a lot of alignment with the USDS playbook and its agile methods, but modified to account for the reality that for the serious problems we face as a nation, nobody does it by themselves. It always takes a coalition, a community that spans a lot of different agencies, levels of government, public sector, and private sector. And the core challenge we have is improving how that diverse community works together to empower and share information. So tying it back to making the point here that with the geospatial information sharing, again, it's a community-based approach. There's a need for security and privacy constraints. Those change over the life cycle of geospatial information. It's critically important to have a handle on what that looks like holistically for the different partners, so that you're not building artificial barriers to sharing, especially when you're looking at broad-based use cases, whole of government, whole of society use cases. But core to geospatial information sharing is dealing with those access, security, privacy type of constraints. We worked on the Geospatial Interoperability Reference Architecture with our partners in the US government, with the Federal Geographic Data Committee, with the Open Geospatial Consortium. The interesting thing about this work is that while it's comprehensive, a third or less go to the technical standards, a third or more go to process, governance, a third or more goes to policy, the kinds of things I was just talking about. Really a proof point for why geospatial information sharing has to anchor in a broader framework. The geospatial layer really does offer so much opportunity for information integration across a lot of domains of information to improve decision making. If I had more time, and maybe we'll get into it later on, but a key idea in my community is that place-based policing, place-based techniques really offer a lot of support for preventing harm and enhancing security, much more than traditional other approaches. And there's a lot of really interesting academic research to reinforce that as the trend for the future. We may be short on time, so I'm going to skip this, but this is the video on the Testbed 11, a demonstration of the Open Geospatial Consortium process of testing standards, working code wins, evocative scenarios that make it real for folks, and we love that process. Finally, just to wrap up, more information, follow us on Twitter at Share and Protect, come to our website. Looking forward to the discussion. Thanks.